You've been hearing all of this talk about Chat GPT. What in the world is it, and how is it even helpful for us as STEM teachers? In this episode, I will be explaining to you what in the world Chat GPT is and 3 practical uses of how you can use it in your classroom. Welcome to the Elementary STEM Coach Podcast, a show that'll help you with lesson ideas, systems, and actionable tips to apply to your classroom. I am your host, Naomi Meredith, a former classroom teacher turned current STEM teacher and coach. With over a decade of experience teaching and a master's degree in STEM leadership, I am here to coach you throughout the year to help you gain back more time to create innovative experiences for your students. Grab your earbuds and let's get started. First, let's get a basic definition of what Chat GPT is. Chat GPT is a type of AI or artificial intelligence software. I don't know why it's actually called Chat GPT, but think of it as another AI tool like Siri and Alexa. So it is a base where you can actually ask it questions and it will answer you. In fact, I actually had Chat GPT help me write a definition. I asked it, so you type your little question, and I asked it, write me a definition to explain Chat GPT to an elementary student. So here's what Chat GPT came up with, and I thought it was actually a pretty good definition. Chat GPT is a talking computer program that can understand what people are saying and can respond to them in a way that makes sense. It is like a smart robot that can have conversations with people in natural language, just like how we talk to each other. It has been trained on a lot of books, articles, and other text, so it knows a lot of words and can use them to answer questions or have a conversation. I'm going to explain to you how I've actually used this in my STEM lesson planning, and it's actually pretty fun. As of now, at the time of this recording, it is a free tool, so look it up. It's in the show notes. So when you go in there, you'll just create a free account and then it will actually save all your little conversations that you have with Chat GPT. It's almost like in a way, if you remember Ask Jeeves, where you would ask a question and it would come up with like a more conversational answer. It's kind of like that with back in the day, if you know what I'm talking about. So it's kind of like that. It's a little bit different than a Google search, where in a Google search, you're looking for articles, blogs, podcasts, maybe podcasts like this one. But it's, again, more in a conversational way, and it will come up with more of a conversational answer, which is pretty awesome. Of course, with any technology, there is a lot of pushback as to what the repercussions of this can be, especially since it is pulling from so many different resources. My worry is how does this play into copyright and how much is it pulling from one source than another? So the ways that I'm using this in my STEM classroom, it's not so much to publish information, but more as a way to really help with my lesson planning and more of a brainstorming idea. Kind of think of it like you're bouncing ideas off of another person. That's how I like to use it in my STEM instruction. Also, especially as a STEM teacher and really any teacher in this world that we live in and preparing 22nd century learners, we really need to learn to embrace new technology anyway. I am still learning what ChatGPT is, so even after this recording, I'll probably learn more. And there's going to be some updates, of course, but it's cool to try out new stuff and see how it can be helpful. You can always take a little bit of that, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and see how it's going to work out. So, of course, it's not a perfect tool, and you'll hear from my examples of how it's not, but it's actually kind of fun to play around with. So let's jump into these 3 ways how you can use ChatGPT in your STEM teaching. The first way that you can use ChatGPT in your STEM classroom is to help you with lesson planning ideas. The other day, my friend Becca McMillan, who you heard on the podcast back in episode 40, we were chatting because we are really good friends. And we were chatting about different STEM station ideas for a specific standard that she was going to teach in first grade. At the time, I actually didn't have a bank of resources for this particular standard, but I had some ideas in mind, but also wanted to do a little bit of more brainstorming as I was texting her. So to help me brainstorm some ideas, I went onto ChatGPT and typed in kindergarten hands-on lessons for weather. And I know I just said first grade, it was actually for kindergarten. And it was pretty cool. It came up with a list of ideas written in a conversational way. Some really weren't for kindergarten, some weren't so great, but actually it made me remember, oh, yeah, that would be a really cool idea for weather. Or, oh, I could modify this for my grade level. So it didn't lay everything step by step by step, but it was just kind of like a brainstorm ideas. There aren't any pictures, it's all words. So it was a really cool way to gather ideas for your STEM lesson planning. And we figured out some ideas for her STEM stations, and she was able to take that back into her classroom. In turn, I kept those ideas to the side. So when I'm ready to teach that standard, I had those ideas ready to go. Like I mentioned before, once you create your free account in Chat GPT, it will save all your little conversations with the AI. So you actually can go back into that conversation, reopen it. You can ask the question in a different way. You can have it reword it. You can maybe change the grade level you were looking for. So pretty cool that it's all in this one little area, all organized for you digitally. Another way that you can use ChatGPT in your STEM lesson planning is to have it help you write kid-friendly definitions. This in the STEM space can be really tricky when you are explaining these high-level concepts to, well, elementary students. In a weird way, this is something I actually enjoy doing. Back in college, I worked at a preschool and I worked with an awesome lead teacher. I was her assistant. It was in pre-K. And she was so good at explaining high level concepts to these little 4-year-olds. And I took a lot of the things that I learned from her and have applied it in my teaching over the years. But I still get stuck on ways to explain things to kids, especially I have to know how to teach things for K through 5. So sometimes I might know it at a 5th grade level, but I need to explain it in a kindergarten level because when you look at the standards, well, they have a repetition of things. So for this podcast, I asked ChatGPT, write a kid-friendly definition to describe what the water cycle is. And it had a really great example that could definitely help me when I'm creating an anchor chart for my students. Here's what ChatGPT came up with for that definition. The water cycle is the way that water moves around the earth. It starts when the sun heats up with water in rivers, lakes, and oceans and turns it into water vapor. So it kept on explaining that water cycle, but it was a pretty good kid definition that I'm like, hey, that's really helpful. I like that explanation. I can use that to help explain things to my students. So keep that in mind if you're getting a little bit stuck on how to explain these high-level concepts to your kids. Check out ChatGPT and it might give you some ideas of the wording of those things. And the third way that you can use ChatGPT in your STEM planning is creating lists. I definitely love lists. I use a list to help me plan this podcast, but it's pretty cool how this can help you create a list based on ideas that you give it and questions that you ask. One way that I use ChatGPT to help me with list creation is to create book lists for K through 2 based on STEM standards. Now, I did use other tools to help me research, but again, I use ChatGPT as a brainstorm tool to help me get some ideas of books that I probably forgot about or books I had never even heard of. And when I am talking about books that I have never heard of, be careful too with all of the knowledge that ChatGPT gives you. It's not always 100% accurate. It came up with some really cool book lists, but sometimes when I looked up the books, some of them didn't even exist. And the title of the book sounded awesome. Sometimes it was actually a real author, but they weren't things that went together. So that was pretty weird. But overall, it helped me as a starting point to create these book lists. And if you're interested in seeing those are all in my K through 2 STEM virtual planning workshop, which will be linked in the show notes. But you can also jump in on the recording, and that's at naomimeredith.com/primary workshop. So it did help me plan out those book lists when you're creating STEM and stories and books that would really go along with those grade level standards. So again, another jumping off point to create a list. Another way, it kind of like before when you're thinking of lesson planning ideas, you could have it list out things to do with certain materials. So I asked ChatGPT, make a list of things that kids can do with cardboard. So this could even be a fun after school club idea. So here was some of the fun things that ChatGPT came up with. kids can create a cardboard guitar, and it kind of gave me some directions. They said kids can create a guitar by cutting out the shape of a guitar and attaching a cardboard tube as the neck. They can then decorate it with paint or markers. Isn't that cute how it explains it? It also gave me the idea of they could create a puppet theater using cardboard. And they also suggested students could create a bookshelf, which that actually would be a pretty cool STEM challenge. And maybe kids could create a bookshelf and then have books in the library be displayed and see how many books that it could hold. Just making this up as I'm talking to this to you. This is how my brain works. So again, another cool way that you can use Chat GPT to help you with all of these ideas. As a recap, here are 3 ways that you can get started using Chat GPT as a STEM teacher and implementing this in your classroom. First, you can use Chat GPT for lesson planning ideas. Next, it can also help you write kid-friendly definitions. And finally, Chat GPT can help you with creating lists. After listening to this episode, I hope you're not as scared trying out this tool. Definitely check it out, play around with it. It's actually kind of fun as well, just hearing the responses that it comes back with, just like when we were asking Siri and Alexa things. I know a lot of people were very wary of that. Same kind of vibes, but it's also a lot of fun as well. So don't be scared, try it out. Now, I will say I wouldn't recommend using this for elementary students yet because it is so new and it is just, we don't know what it's going to come up with and when it comes to filters. But think about for you as the teacher how this can be helpful. Now, if you want more help with your lesson planning and want me to pop into your inbox like your own personal Chat GPT, definitely check out my free K-5 STEM year-long plan where I have the whole year mapped out for you and all of the connected standards and lessons that I teach in my classroom. So that will pop right into your inbox, a lot like how Chat GPT pops in the little box there with its answers. And you can grab that at naomimeredith.com/yearlong plan. And of course, it's linked in the show notes. Have fun with this new to you technology tool and let me know how you end up using it. I hope to hear from you soon. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Elementary STEM Coach Podcast. I would love to connect with you over on Instagram at NaomiMeredith_ or send me an email to elementarystemcoachpodcast@gmail.com. Also, make sure to check out my website, naomimeredith.com, to see all the show notes from today's episode and shop my K-5 STEM resources. Any questions you have, needs for resources, or ideas for episodes, get in touch. I'll talk to you soon.